Hello and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and you're listening to episode 107 with Anastas Michos, ASC GSC, DP of Cabinet of Curiosities, The Autopsy. Enjoy.
Have you been watching anything cool recently?
Watch anything cool? No, I have our colleagues, DP, who attended Cannes, and she says there's some great stuff out there. But no, I have not. Nothing that would.
Just busy.
Just busy. And then when I'm not busy, you managed to catch me in Manhattan before I went down to the. I actually have a boat down in the Chesapeake Bay.
Oh yeah, I had heard you mentioning that in a different interview. About,
I was on that boat.
Yeah, well, also just when the restrictions came around, you were like, "All right, I'm out to."
Oh yeah. It's basically what it is. So once that habit kicks in, a lot of reading gets done, but not too much of watching. Because of, I'm still a huge fan of the big screen.
Yeah,
and I'm not, it's difficult for me to watch serialized things. I'm not really big on serials.
I have I have a similar compulsion. If it's like a 6-episode series, I know like how long that's going to be, an anthology or whatever, I can get in on that. But when it's ongoing, like even something like Succession, I was like not in a huge rush to get caught up in the same way that, like, for instance, Cabinet of Curiosities was like, oh, I'll bang through this in, one shot because it has finality to it.
It has finality, and it also has a totally different dramatic arc and a totally different kind of storytelling. The purpose of a long episode or a long season is to make sure that people tune back.
Right.
That is the actual drive of what that arc is in that episode. You would leave enough stuff hanging so that somebody comes back.
Right.
In feature work or other kinds of much more defined work, it's just totally different kind of storytelling, I believe. I mean, so the structure's different, so the photography's different, so blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose the less so now, but certainly in the length of time that you've worked in cinematography, television cinematography and film cinematography, two completely separate things. Nowadays, it's a little closer, but if you were good at one, probably wanted to stay there.
Right. I mean, you still, the major difference is, aside from time, and time and money has even gotten closer, is scale. I mean, people have big TVs, but they're still not the size of a 30-foot screen or 40-foot screen. So you can get, one quote gets away with a lot more in television. That's the one thing about it, in terms of just the thing. And the other thing, though, is for the most part, when you're on a series and you're back in Katie's bedroom for the 15th time,
right?
Night interior, Katie's bedroom. Right. Katie talks on phone.
Through the window.
Like, okay, so what are we doing here? Because it's also the role of the cinematographer to keep tone and camera within the same space with different directors coming in. So
sure.
So therefore, then it becomes, well, people need to know that it's like it's doing a franchise movie. Marvel got to look like Marvel,
right?
And Spider-Man got to look like Spider-Man. I mean, whatever next one is can't be a breakout. And when it is a breakout, people go bananas,
right?
And they it's formulaic for a reason, because people want what they know. They don't want to be figuring anything out when it's episode 8.
Right. I've interviewed a couple of the folks who worked on the Marvel films, and I kept trying to probe, like, how are they keeping it consistent? Are they forcing certain colorists on you? Are they forcing camera packages on you? And the answer that Greg Middleton gave me, that I was like, oh, fucking duh, was they allow everyone to use each other's LUTs.
Yeah, I mean, it's all.
I was like,
stuff. Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
Didn't even think that Marvel just had like a library of LUTs. They're like, yeah, if you want the whatever, the Iron Man LUT, you just take that.
And
We've
that's the
approved
way, but that's the way it works too. I mean, it actually is very interesting that way. And of course, the Marvel has such a control over their imagery in post. I mean, we shoot the scene. I've shot a series, Marvel series, and we shoot the scene.
Yeah, Miss Marvel, right?
You shoot, yeah. You shoot the actor. You shoot the background play on every shot. I mean, just in case we want to replace the actor.
Right.
If 2 people sitting, 8 people around a dining room table, after we're done with their close-up, the actor gets up and we roll camera.
So are you doing
and then while they're doing their
are you just doing a lot of like match moving or what do you call it, remote head stuff?
There's a fair amount of it, but it really has to do with the control of what happens if we do want to take that actor and put him in a different scene. So certain times we'll do the entire scene, then throw a green screen behind the scene, and they'll do it another take with a green screen. Then we'll FO the actor, FO the green screen, and just shoot the background. And now, of course, part of it is also, remember, one of the huge questions that the writers are out on, that DGA's tried to settle, that the SAG is coming up with, is what is the future of AI?
Mm-hmm.
And how is it going to be used by the conglomerates, by the corporations within the creative and ownership of image? And what is the creative process? And when you start to be able to scan everybody's face and also have their backgrounds and everything else, you can construct your own sensibility and your own film. And one of the, I know, big sticking points is because there was actually a court case about it, I'm trying to remember the who's and whys of it, where an actor not only was, so normally contractually, the actor's voice has to be the actor's voice.
Is this
you can't have somebody. It might have been that
for Back to the Future.
Yeah, it might have been that. I don't remember, but yeah, I mean, about that then. So I mean, I don't need to talk about it because basically.
Oh no, go ahead. No, I was just trying to.
No, but the reality,
audience might not know.
Yeah, but obviously the issue is, contractually now you can't use another actor's voice as whoever this person is. But there is nothing in the contract that says you can't use an AI voice to make it sound like.
Right.
And then at that point, we routinely put tears on somebody's face.
Right.
Routinely. Or take them away because we think they're crying too much. But then all of a sudden you're changing a performance. Where does that end? When all of a sudden you can actually make the mouth move in a certain way and the eyebrows move in a certain way and change the entire scene and change the entire tone of the, whatever it is. So whatever this actor brought to the table and whatever they own as performance, as because that's authorship. And so that's a huge sort of very sticky place that we're going down in the fast food world of films.
Right. Well, and it is kind of a fascinating fuzzy line, isn't it? Because like we've been perfectly fine with art directing the scene a little bit, removing some elements here, elements there. That fucks with the production designer's job, but whatever. And or split comps, maybe the 2 actors didn't say those things at the exact same times, but all right, timing, fine. But yeah, the whole the tears thing I hadn't even thought of, but I did see that demo where they remapped this woman's face and had her voiceover actress do the words, and her mouth was adjusted so that it looked like she was speaking Spanish.
Like right in sync. So yeah. It becomes this very crazy thing, and there's a tacit understanding on set between production designer and DP that these are, for the most part, it's the same way editorially. The production designer and DP have a tacit understanding of these are the tools I gave you. Right. To work the scene with. Now, I like the chair over here, but the light looks better over there, and we have to move that out. Presumably on films, we've all gone through it and approved said sets beforehand. But all of a sudden, you go, that's not working out. You gotta move this to here and that to there. And the same thing with editorial is very clearly it is for the DP and the director relationship saying, these are the tools I gave you to edit this together.
Right.
I had an editor the other day. I'm in the middle of timing something, and with the director, and I'm saying, the next picture we should do is should be on film. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. Just so you know, I always put a hard mat in on film. And he goes, why? I said, because I can. Right. And the editor goes, well, what do you mean? I go, a hard mat. That means that you can't move the frame around, And he goes, well, what do you mean? I mean, that you can't do what I see you doing in this thing, which is to change my frame, which, right? Because I had a certain intent, but it's only in reciprocity. You did not invite me into the editorial suite to think whether or not 4 frames off of this cut was 2 frames too many.
Right.
I mean, if it's going to be collaborative, then it needs to be a two-way street in all departments. And this is the same thing with, if we do something, you hand it over, but obviously we do it for studios because they're the ones who are paying us, and then they own it. And then all of a sudden we have the person laughing in the scene as opposed to crying. And it's a different actor. There you go.
Yeah. Well, and the hard mat, I haven't even thought about that in a while, because so many people are like, yeah, we're shooting Venice so we can shoot full frame so we can figure out the exact framing after the fact, or we're shooting, sorry, not full frame, but
we're shooting a full frame or open gate, or we're shooting 8K, but we're framing for 4. And then there's all that space everywhere, and they used to be, of course, in film world, we used to always do that, for visual effects. And sure, we get it, I get it too on the other stuff, oh, sure, we can, stabilize, or blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of reasons to do it. But I think that's also, it speaks to the team that gets put together, that's why features are different than series and episodics. For the most part, the DP doesn't time the episodes of an episodic. Right. For the most part, it's a showrunner that goes in there that makes it look like all the other ones.
That's got it. How do you, is it just by using, now you've got LEDs so you can punch a little more, let's say, pre-grade into the image, but without having to fuss around with gels. But is that how you kind of author the image a little bit more when it's just going into an anonymous colorist hands of the showrunner? Do you just, or do you kind of, how do you take ownership of that image before it gets to that point?
The issue, that's a huge cinematography issue. It's something that Imago is fighting. And in terms of authorship laws, the United States has none for the cinematographer. Creator of image has no authorship of image. Creator of music has authorship of music. Creator of creator performance has authorship. Creator of image does not. And it's a question that is certainly niggling and certainly, on my mind when I'm doing a job, and if it's a series, which I don't do too many of, but when I am doing that, I understand, and everybody understands, one is it's an agreed upon look.
Right.
From when you first start, so it's only when there's a change in DPs or something where some new person comes in and goes, well, we want to do this. And you go, well, that's not what that is. So again, signing, I did I wanted to purge things. And,
done a couple of those, eh?
No, just one.
Forever Purge, and then, IMDb.
Oh, no.
The first Purge.
Forever Purge. Yeah, I did the first Purge, but the Forever Purge, that was in the middle of the pandemic, and the DP couldn't come to the United States. So I shot the tail end of the movie, but I don't take credit for the film at all. I mean, I did that kind of thing. So anyway, helped out, yeah. But I remember talking to the producers of said film, and my first question is, this is a franchise, yes? Do you want it to look like the franchise? Because what will I bring to the table? Well, you tell me first, because I can bring a whole lot to the table, but if you ultimately want it to look like that, then I go, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that too. Yeah. So that's sort of the same sort of thing on the series. There's not much you can do, and because we're pretty much mandated on series to shoot raw.
Sure. Yeah.
And then it's all about the deep bay area. So no matter what LUT you put on it, it's raw. So unless you actually shoot the whole thing under red light.
Right. Do you find that I just had two questions. Have you used the Alexa 35 yet?
Yeah.
Did you use the textures in it, or were you forced to just shoot raw? Yeah. Because it feels cool, but at the same time, I'm like, I feel like everyone's just going to lean back on safety and not burn in a textural look,
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, lean back on safety. I grew up learning how to shoot film. Right. So, and then it was film stocks, and it was the choice of film stocks, which then was literally baked in by the nature of if you're shooting Fuji or if you're shooting 218 or whatever you're shooting. But quite honestly, the computing power of the Resolve these days,
yeah,
particularly with the AI coming into it, I mean, that's like a whole other world in terms of what that's able to do and how
it can relight. Yeah, I've used the relight thing in Resolve right now. It's a 2-node solution.
Yeah. So then you're going, so you can't approach, I mean, if you emotionally approach a project that somebody's going to fuck this up, that's a pretty terrible place to be.
Right.
Yeah. So the best thing, what I do is, I mean, what still has an organic feel to it is the glass in front. That's the first thing that the light's going through, and that will affect more than any chip, because, you shoot, basically, I can time a DXL to look like an Arri, to look like a red, I mean, you get in there long enough, and sure, 3 images side by side, and you start to notice the differences, but, it's nobody's going to look at it on their home televisions because those are so far out of whack. But you throw a vintage lens on there as opposed to a Zeiss or a Signature or something, then all of a sudden it's like, well, bang, you can't make that look like that because of that lens. But now we're going into totally different places with virtual lenses, which is, I was just looking at an article the other day.
Yeah, who was I interviewing? I feel like I was just maybe I was just chatting with them, because I've got a few friends that work in lenses, Jay Holben, of course, and someone was telling me that they were modeling lenses to be able to just click a button and have that quote unquote look applied to a theoretical neutral image. But I don't know how you would do so. I mean, I'm sure someone knows, someone's a genius, but like how to apply fall off in the same way. Like, would you just shoot a lens has like infinite depth of field and then somehow get a depth map and then
that's what you do. And my ultimate question is, that really works for McDonald's and it really works for Burger King. It really does. You push the button and the secret sauce is the same, except when you go to Paris, that secret sauce is tailored for that image. But it doesn't work for when I want to really have a nice meal.
Right.
Like the other night, I went to this wonderful new Mexican fish place here in New York, and the oysters were amazing with like a little ginger. I mean, it was just literally right out of some little spot in Oaxaca, a really elegant restaurant. But the point is, you had somebody in the kitchen that had full knowledge of the creative process in a very personalized way, versus somebody who was, I'm not going to say untalented, but less skilled.
Sure.
Pushing the secret sauce button.
Right. Well, and go ahead.
No. Which would you rather eat, or which one would I rather watch? For me, personally, I don't eat McDonald's and things because I know exactly what it tastes like.
Right.
And so Yeah. So, it's the same thing when it does visual effects, and I keep on looking at visual effects and keep on feeding them back. And I go, okay, so where's the chaos? They go, where's the chaos in the shot? Where's the uncontrollable part? Where's the part that, oops, they made a mistake? Which is actually a name of a dessert by a chef in Italy, which was, oops, it's a mistake. And it literally looks like a cracked something that he serves. And it was I've never eaten there, but it was supposed to be, chef's kitchen, Michelin, I think he's Michelin #2 last year type of thing. And what brought him to that place was his chaos, his mistake brought him to a place. So you put the lens on wrong, there's a smudge in it. They didn't wipe the thing quite right, and you go, there's that surprise or joy of creativity of what you got, as opposed to push the button.
Yeah.
We can show you 15 flares.
There was a lot of AI discourse on Twitter, which is a hellscape of a website, but it was a lot of, what people colloquially call tech bros, who are like, we're going to change everything, photographers and filmmakers, like, get ready because we're coming, because we can type some things in and it'll be perfect or whatever. And my argument, which I still stand behind, is that, yeah, okay, you can absolutely go to IKEA and get functional, inexpensive, relatively good-looking furniture. But it doesn't matter how long that exists or how good it gets. If you want something of value, you will go to a carpenter and have them make you a table or a bookshelf or whatever. Because a human made it.
Absolutely. And I agree with you totally on the sense of, I was having this discussion with my son, interesting enough, about Twitter and Instagram and everything else. And inherently in the human condition, things that have value require sacrifice. Whether it's yours or somebody else's, they require a certain amount of effort and sacrifice to either make that an amazing painting that took them 2,000 hours and 6 million little freaking fucking dicky dots on them,
right.
Or that handmade thing that you're talking about with, the artisan cut themselves 7 times to get the curve just right. It requires that. And because without sacrifice, and then it becomes banal, and banality is something that we can get anywhere. So I totally, the tech bros, more power to them, not interested. But the marketplace is driving all of that.
Well, and like you said, it works for McDonald's in the same way, if I can if I'm an advertising executive and I literally just need a product shot in a white, yes, that's absolutely going to take some photographers, lifeblood away, because there are people out there that just do those box shots or whatever. And I think those people should have their jobs, because that's not an easy thing to do. And a lot of those are pretty, but I mean, you watch a car commercial, that last shot of the car sitting there, it's always a fucking CG car.
Always.
We've been doing this for a while.
We have been doing it for a while, and it's a CG car driving along the car thing too. It's actually a real car base with expandable wheel length and wheelbase.
Yeah. Are they still using that?
Yeah.
The Blackbird?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. They still use that because there's certain things that's way cheaper, which is the interaction between tire and environment. So if you're shooting in a real environment, then it's way cheaper to try and get that interaction done,
And then, like you were saying, they can use that plate for their next commercial if they know it's not a pickup now, but it's got the same wheelbase.
Yeah, but the question and those things come in advertising, because I've noodled around with the AI stuff, is even in advertising, does it get you Where's the Beef? Does it get you I Love New York? Does it get you the iconic phraseology that 6 people sitting around a table go, yeah, that's right, that's it. That's it. Because every time, and I know I call AI, plagiarism, basically.
At the moment, it absolutely is, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, the creative process is that, because we're all influenced, But I think there's something that changes because of chaos, because the organic nature of humans, that we might be thinking of that thing, but somehow we remember something from when we were 3, and that made it work.
Right. Well, if we're going to say like, oh, I'm using anamorphics on this project because I liked Indiana Jones back in the 80s, that's a far cry from I lifted the absolute exact look of this scene from Indiana Jones and replaced the characters, but like the lighting and the scene and everything are exactly the same, but it has an anamorphic look. Like those are two completely different.
And it works the other way. I totally agree. It works the other way. Several years ago, I watched back to back the Blu-ray series of Alien.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I've done that a few times. Probably every other year I do that.
Right. And I go, Ridley's looked like it was shot yesterday.
I say that exact phrase so many times about that Blu-ray cut.
I look at it and I go, oh, the other two, totally dated, totally within their time period, totally within that thing. So, yeah, there's certain things that, I guess my point is that as far as going back, it also goes to the forward thinking thing where you are, with artificial intelligence, you can only, I believe at the moment anyway, build upon something that has been built on before.
Ostensibly correct, yeah.
Yeah, I'm grabbing that and grabbing that. I have all this input from the Google over the world, right? But it's very difficult for the program, to imagine something that it doesn't have input for.
Right.
And sometimes that's what genius is like, how did you think of that? No idea.
Yeah.
And from a visual standpoint, from music, from everything, so it's an interesting place. Anyway, is this a topic that we're actually supposed to be talking about?
Yeah.
Or is this all good? Because we're rambling.
I told you at the beginning, you can talk about pencils for 20 minutes if you want, but
I didn't want to talk about pencils, but I didn't know if there was any specificity that Perry Brookman had me saying.
Oh no.
Or are we all good?
We're good. But that is a good kind of segue into if we want to get into the nuts and bolts of it. Speaking of people just coming up with stuff, Guillermo del Toro's always been I've always been a big fan of his because all of his films feel very inventive, even though he's taking from places that I think that maybe it is that he's taking from places that I'm not familiar with, so it's all new to me. But very inventive person, especially like you're saying, musicians are very inventive in the same way that AI can't be. But I suppose in the more press side of things, how did you get involved with the Cabinet of Curiosities?
Oh, through a producer, Phil Whaley, I shot a film called The Empty Man. And The Empty Man was directed by David Pryor. And it was at a time when Fox was going through its machinations, and it didn't it's a very cerebral examination of an existential question framed in a horror genre. Right? And David, so anyway, that came out and David got the gig to do an episode. So Guillermo had seen that, asked David to direct it, and then David said, hey, we're going to do another thing together. So that's the short answer to that one.
Yeah. I have to say, your episode's probably my favorite out of all of them. I think it was, they're all great. I love them all. I think Guillermo could probably take one photo and I'd watch it for 2.5 hours. But I think yours was probably my favorite. Plus, F. Murray Abraham, the best.
Oh God, what a
watch that dude for years.
Like many times, yeah, you could watch him like just cooking hot dogs and not even serving them on a bun. He'd just cook your hot dog and put it on something else, and you go, okay, this is really good. And he's hilarious. He's incredibly reverent. I mean, he's old enough to deserve the right to be irreverent about anything. Right. So that was great fun. I mean, I have to say that was great fun. And it was interesting because David had I kind of tuned into David's sort of sensibilities. So I think that's, after doing a feature with him, I think that's one of the reasons I got called back to echo certain things. And he's a huge fan of camera with intent, and part of doing the Cabinet of Curiosities was to try and keep it, I'm not even saying the Guillermo wheelhouse, somewhere on Guillermo's boat, and right. You have to be that close to the wheelhouse, right. Because they're all so disparate, and basically the scripts were I think the scripts were the connective tissue in terms of the way they were structured for the most part. Because the photography certainly wasn't from one episode to another. Right. There were no restrictions. It was like, shoot it the way you want to shoot it, do it the way you want to do it. But somewhere, I think I said this, somewhere in the back of my mind, it was always, this is Guillermo's thing. So maybe we should use a couple nods to the palette.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Tamara was just a phenomenal production designer. And yes. I mean, I say it everywhere because unlike a series where it's about a cop show and we have a cop house and have a thread, and so therefore 15 sets get built or 20 sets get built and you have 6 episodes and, you go from one to another, everything was just separate. She literally had, 6 movies to do.
Right.
That had nothing to do with each other. And sometimes trying to rework one set for 2 months from now, that might get turned into something else, right? So it was, hats off to her. She's wonderful, and I think she got nods on it as well. She does a lovely work with Guillermo on his movies as well. So
yeah, did you find that because not all of, a lot of the shorts or whatever you want to call them episodes are ostensibly take place in one place? Did you find that because your episode all takes place in that main chunk and then the little side freezer or whatever, but did you find that was an advantage and kind of unlocked a lot of your freedom, or
oddly enough, when you break down the schedule, I think we had 15 days, or maybe we wanted 15 days. Or maybe
we're given 8.
Yeah, one of those things, whatever that was. It was more than 2 weeks. So I think it was 10 days plus a little bit or something. It was in the pandemic too. What you recognize is that most of it was shot on location. I think we only spent 3 days in the autopsy room out of the 17-day schedule. A lot of that has to do with a lot of it has to do with the efficiency of shooting on a stage.
Yeah.
Where you're literally you light it and now we're moving cameras, turning lights on and off as opposed to driving, loading, unloading, blah, blah, blah. So it's a little somehow possibly misleading that one feels like, oh gosh, for me, most of the work was on location. I in my head, that's a location thing.
That's interesting.
Because of when I looked at the schedule, it was like 2 days, 1 day, 2 days, 2 days there, 3 days. Oh shit, this company moved twice. Oh my gosh, 2 days, end of schedule, 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay, 4 days on stage.
Right. That's cool.
It's just how we look at stuff.
Yeah. Well, and also I did not rewatch it before this. I am going a little bit off memory, but because I watched that thing the second it came out. Like when they were advertising that, I was like, "That's that's for me. Give me that." Like,
I don't know what they're doing. I hear there might be another burst like that because it was so well received. But who knows what Netflix is doing?
Yeah, I know some people at Netflix. Oh, maybe. Anyway, can you talk to me a little, kind of on a ground level about what the lighting plot was in the autopsy room? Because it's a gorgeous look that you achieved in that small. Yeah, it's not that small of a space, but in that room, you've done quite well. I love the color contrast between the blues and the oranges and everything, and kind of was there any references for that? Did that kind of...
Yeah, the whole thing had a reference because prior, David he said, let's watch Deer Hunter. And part of it was because it's a favorite film of his, but also in terms of tone, it's in the same period. It was shot in the 70s, right?
Right.
In a small little mining town. But interestingly enough, it felt like the 50s because that's the nature of the 70s in a small little mining town.
Sure.
And so that's what our production design was kind of pushing back with. Like, we're shooting it's a 70s movie. It's a 70s element, but production design, we're going to be in 50s and 40s looking buildings in a town that looks like it was the newest building that was built in the 30s. And so I was embracing that in terms of the look, in terms of for the lighting as well, in terms of sources and whatnot, and not trying to go too saturated and everything else with the color palettes, but still, and still in the back of my mind going, all right, this is Guillermo likes the golden tones and he likes the contrasting against the greens and whatnot. And, it's a horror film, but at the same time it's playing on a television. So I have to be careful about how dark really is.
Right.
I mean, I remember it was Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And the entire world went, we didn't get to see that. And it's because the entire world had their television set.
Right. Different setting. That I've always been...
I mean, you go... Yeah.
I was going to say that, so I'm a freelance colorist as well. And right now I'm having the conversation with a client about, they came over, looked at my calibrated screen. I know the calibrated screen works. I've seen it in theaters, matches, we're good. And this person was like, well, if it doesn't look like that on my laptop. And I was like, right, but my screen's calibrated and yours is who knows what. And they were like, well, if I have a MacBook and most people have MacBooks, shouldn't we calibrate it to my MacBook? And I was just like, that's a great thought, except for then it'll look like, let's say this thing lives on the internet forever, it gets really popular, and then screens get better and better and better. As time progresses, your project will look worse and worse and worse because it was calibrated to an unstandard target and not what is objectively correct.
Right. And that's the whole thing about calibrating a MacBook, is that even on a MacBook, you can change its gamma on the screen, and everybody got that little brightness button,
right,
that they put wherever they want.
That was the other thing. They had the brightness jacked up to 1,000, and they're like, I'm seeing a lot of artifacting. And I was like, well, don't touch that button. Yeah, don't do that. Yeah. Doctor, it hurts when I do this. Yeah, don't do that.
There's a lot of that. So it's the same sort of sensibility. And I do remember, and back in the film days, the only time I ever got to be sure that when we were doing prints, right, it was always a range in terms of foot Lamberts. It was somewhere between 15 and 18 is what the screen had to be in, because sort of like NTSC had sort of said that, okay, movie screen should be at this particular level. And then, I had a film open up, one of my very first features at the Ziegfeld, and I go flying over to the Ziegfeld, which is an enormous screen. It's like, it's like the Egyptian. It's, it's like a 2,000 seaters. It's huge. And guess what? From, 100 yards away, the screen is nowhere near, right. And, the guys are upstairs trying to put a new bulb in and every other thing. And, I'm thinking, we got 3 days. Can we strike new prints? Because it's a premiere. I mean, yeah. So as much as sometimes as much as I shoot the digital of it all, I do like knowing that, the Barco in the back is pretty much the Barco in the back no matter where I go.
Yeah. That actually does bring up a question that I do enjoy asking folks who have a hefty experience with film and then transition to digital. And that is, what are some of the things that, film gave you? I remember hearing you talk about the importance of dailies and how that was an experience that changed.
What did you listen to?
I don't know.
Okay,
a few years ago.
Okay, yes.
There's a few like 2-hour jams I had to listen to at 2-speed. But, what things about film do you miss? And what things about digital do you think are good, better?
The thing about digital that's better is what we were just talking about, which is the standardization of exhibition. That I feel relatively comfortable in the theater that basically the last projection I saw in the DI room is going to be in approximation very close to that. That's huge, because I related the story about trying to do it otherwise and measuring them. What I miss, aside from, like you mentioned, dailies, what I always tell younger DPs that are just starting out and people who I've been mentoring and whatnot is the image lives in your imagination. So when you get to work in the morning, after you've spoken about it with the production designer and director a million times, the image is in here. And so then therefore the job is to translate it out there. Be it, oh my God, it's really sunny and I got to fly 60 by 30s out, or whatever it is, night exterior, people say, oh, day exterior. And I think, oh, that's probably one of my hardest things to ever do. Unless I'm shooting away northern Canada or somewhere, because of consistency. But what I find is that younger DPs cannot imagine a frame without a monitor.
Right. Well, we don't have fucking viewfinders. I can't find a viewfinder for the life of me.
I know. And what I mean by that is they can't even imagine camera placement. They can't imagine lens. No, that's not right. Let's change it. No, that's not right. Let's change it. Let me look. That's not right. It is the virtuosity of instrument that I miss. And film gave you the training to have the virtuosity of instrument. There's a plethora of musicians who can compose without an instrument there.
Right.
They literally hear it and put it down on a piece of paper. And we know some of the big ones from way back and some of the ones today. They don't need a keyboard. They're just listening to music, which is incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
In terms of a process, which is also incredibly freeing as a DP, because I don't need a camera. I'm looking at a script. I'm wandering the streets. I can imagine, oh yeah, that would look like that on a 75. There should be a 300. We should do something like that. I think that's the main difference, is that the lack of immediate response. Embracing a latent image allows you to train your mind to imagine things versus react to things. And it's the same thing. I was talking to the editor and my director, James DeMonico, Purge Dude, about the Avid, what he misses, what he likes and what he misses, because he started in film. And it was like, oh yeah, I would go home. I wouldn't make the cut, because if it was a 1-frame cut, I didn't want to watch it go through the flatbed anymore. So I'd have to imagine it, or I'd have to wait on it a second.
Take paper notes.
I mean, and him being a writer, it speaks to that part of the process where you're looking at a blank piece of paper and you literally try to imagine words. You're not just pulling words out of a thing and sticking them in there like the little magnetic poetry thing on a refrigerator. And everybody always has something pithy, and you go, yeah, but they gave you those words. Every refrigerator looks the same. It looks profound, but it's really, it's AI.
Yeah, we all have it, live, laugh, love in the same. Yeah.
Exactly. They all gave you live, laugh, love. So,
well, and it also gives, I think, that sort of, I suppose, pre-visualization that you're talking about, or present visualization, gives you a target. So when you finally do have the thing in front of you, if anything doesn't match that target, you'll do your best to match it. And if you can't with the tools you're given, you get close and accept that. But
change totally.
Sure.
That is, and I don't know how often that happens. By imagining you're far more equipped to change.
Yeah.
Because than you are otherwise. Because often I would be working with a director. Sometimes I'm working with a director and it's not working, and they say something, and you go, "Yeah, okay, let's try it," and it has nothing to do with what you talked about. But you can just look out into space and go, "Oh yeah, that actually might work."
Yeah. Well, I've definitely been put in the position as a DP where, you're behind the monitor and you've got director here, producer here, ad exec there, and they're all pointing, and everyone's got that piece of tape that says "do not touch the monitor," but everyone's pointing.
Everybody's touching the monitor, pointing at something.
Can we change? Can that come down? Can this? And I'm like, we can bring that down and resolve. We're like, yeah, but I'd just like to see it. And you're like, oh, for fuck's sake. Everyone picks the smallest little thing to obsess over that has no bearing on like the final film itself. Everyone's like, well, that little corner do you think people are going to see? Like, no.
I think part of it is because I was talking to another director, and I had a color session where the execs were involved, and the character was on a Ferris wheel, Santa Monica Pier, going around, and I hear his voice pipe up out of the speaker going, "Why are the lights moving across your face?" And I stop and I look at my director and I'm thinking, "You take that one, okay?"
Right.
He's on a Ferris wheel.
Have you seen the Santa Monica Ferris wheel? It's very lit up.
Very lit up, and it's moving. Their lights are moving everywhere. Well, I find it distracting. But she's on a Ferris wheel. Like many times people will comment because they feel it's their job to comment. And it's, I think, what you're talking about as a DP, when you shoot and you have an ad agency and a director and this and that, and they go, "Oh, if I don't say something, my colleagues will think that I have nothing to say." So rather than there is nothing to say, which is very different than I have nothing to say.
Right.
I sit through production meetings with nothing to say because there's nothing to say.
I have no notes makes a lot of people feel happy.
Exactly. And it means,
and they'll remember you brought them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Rather than I have a note and the note is a stupid one, but at least I'm showing my boss or somebody that somehow I'm paying attention. Anyway, but yeah, that's an issue. And so I had much preferred the "will it look like that" question. And I was back in the day where I was like, well, no, this is a black and white monitor. We're shooting color. So, right off the bat, it's not going to look like that. Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to see what it's going to look like, look over there and look at the scene, and then, use your imagination. Squint a little bit. Know what a 75 mil looks like at a T1, because we're using, vintage lenses, and then that'll be what it looks like, just like that in there. But if you don't know any of that, then it'll look like what it looks like tomorrow morning. And there's some beauty to the latent image. There is a wonderful surprise that I think energizes the creative process. It's like letting the sauce simmer.
Yeah.
You put it all in there and you go, this is going to be really good. And then you take it out of the oven 6 hours later and you go, oh, wow. Because it doesn't taste anything like what you put it in 6 hours beforehand.
Yeah.
And then the next day, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I was talking to another DP about that exact thing where kind of what you're saying about dailies in the other interview, which is that energy that you get from it. When you wait, it's just delayed gratification. And it's also a surprise because you didn't see what it looked like exactly day of. So now you're like, oh, look, we all did a good job. Or not. But, at the best day.
Right. It's affirmation. And affirmation is really good, particularly when it's not third party, but it doesn't have a point of view, and you have reaffirmed it for yourself. The soup is good. Why? Because 6 hours later I tasted it and I liked it. Right now the soup was pretty sucky because nothing was cooked. Right. There is something that you bring that to the process, and that process among everybody, I think makes better work because of it. And again, talking the dailies and the reason that James has dailies, but many directors do not, and they don't like the process. And I've always been one to go, but it makes it better.
Doesn't like everyone sitting in a room and having a discussion about it? Like, doesn't like sharing the diffusion of ownership or something like that?
I guess that's what it is. I guess it's also, I think that you have to, because I remember being petrified as a B camera operator, as I started the business as a B camera operator. I never was a focus puller, but we all are petrified of our own inadequacies.
Right.
And in dailies, you have to share that with your collaborator. Just because we were all there when we were shooting doesn't mean that, we're not carrying those insecurities with us. And I think much of that comes from that. And so you're able to shed that, then the creative process works better. It's a wonderful thing. And I recommend it to every filmmaker to watch, which is Peter Jackson's Get Back. The Beatles.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And they go, why? And I said, because that's what the creative process is. That's what collaboration is. That somebody brings in a song and sings it poorly in front of their bandmates, and their bandmates are non-judgmental, listening intently. They fuck up what they're fucking up. Nobody knows where they're going with it. Somebody says, let's sing it off key. They go into some other world and start singing a samba or some kids thing. They come back again. The juices look now flipped. And all of a sudden you get, when I find myself in trouble as a masterpiece, and you realize, because when he tells a story about that, you go, it had nothing to do with Mother Mary, it had to do with somebody else. And so threw that line out there. And, that kind of process is really important in a collaborative form. And we don't seem to have that anymore, except on these little Zoom calls, which is so antiseptic and dysfunctionally non-present, as useful as they are.
Yeah. Well, I believe you started as a musician, right? When you were younger?
Kind of, sort of, yeah. I play music.
Yeah,
I play, yeah.
Guitars there.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, my mother was a singer, and my uncle was a professional musician, and so was my mom. And I thought that was going to be a good career path, but no.
Yeah. My dad was a drummer and got me.
Oh, there you go.
And, but something that I've always kind of wrestled with, and actually through now 110 episodes of this podcast, have kind of figured out what it was. And because I thought it was more complicated, but it literally was when I was a kid in bands or just goofing off with my friends. That was such a gratifying experience that when I pivoted to film, when I was younger, it was still that. It was still sitting in a room with your friends making music. And then the further and further I got along into a professional career, the less and less it felt like that. And the more and more it felt like pulling teeth. And I've asked so many DPs like who have a background in music, like what's that thing? And I think you actually just nailed it. It's the in-room collaboration. A lot of DPs have talked about how pre-production is their favorite part because it's so imaginative.
Me too. Absolutely. The world is so possible, everything. But also, but again, it's the thing that you were saying as a musician, and it's the when you get to collaborate with somebody and feel comfortable enough to be foolish with the ideal. I have a wonderful friendship with an amazing camera operator. A couple of guys that are just amazing. Mitch Dubin and Lucas Bielan, and I've known Lucas since he was since he was Sven Nykvist's driver, and I was an operator, and we bumped into each other because I came down to do Steadicam on Gilbert Grape, and we became friends. And then he recommended me as Sven's driver, or I think he might have been a second then or loader, because we got along great, to tag along with Sven, and Sven would hire me to operate with him. The long story and short of that is when you're working with somebody who you trust to be foolish, then we could throw ideas out there and they will help you see through the comedy of them or the absurdity of them into the kernel of what you're looking for. Latch on to that, and then you both take off together. Right. So I would be describing your thought, and then all of a sudden his face would be looking at me and goes, "Oh, what if you go the other way?" And you, oh yeah, the other way. What happens if we play it as a samba and we're not playing it as a waltz? Just lay that beat in. Oh, wait a minute, we're onto something. Oh no, maybe too much, back off. But we're onto something. You can't play Strauss, that way, but let's back off of it, and we might be getting somewhere.
Well, that's the part that feels good, right? Like the final product does not feel good. The final product exists, and you're like, you can be proud of it, but it doesn't give you that same gratification that those
totally agreed
sessions give.
Because ultimately the final product is then the outcome of a lot of hard repetitive work.
Yeah.
In most things, once you get that, like, oh, this is working, then you got to like really work at it repetitively, right, to make sure it's working. And then by the time you get to it, it's like, yeah, okay, you felt the work part of it all. It's like doing this much of a painting, thinking, God, that's pretty brilliant, and then realizing you have to do the whole freaking wall that way.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you had mentioned Steadicam and operating it, and I wanted to ask, because you did not invent the Steadicam, but you were next to the person who did.
Well, Garrett Brown is a dear friend, and he was a mentor of mine. So he and I met when I was kind of just trying to get into the business, and I was actually a news camera person who edited and shot news stuff, like local TV stuff for summer replacement. And I assisted him on a couple of Steadicam things that he had done, because he was a DP at the time, a director DP as well, doing commercials. And then he had this amazingly brilliant idea to invent something called a Skycam, which is what we use today on football games. And so
the cable cam thing.
Yeah, the four cameras, 4 cables thing in the middle, NFL, that thing. And he invented that by he happened to be on the set of, it's his story, not mine, but he was again, it's collaboration, man. He happened to be on the set of Little House on the Prairie, right, doing Steadicam. He and Landon, right? Wasn't that the actor's name?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I've seen that show since I was a kid.
Yeah, but he'd also done a lot of movies. Anyway, the guy who brought that to us had a football star called Merrill Olsen, who was pitching the idea like more people would watch football if they can only see it from the coach's point of view. And it was like, what do you mean? Well, yeah, because it's so interesting when it's on top. When it's on top, it's like a chess game. If you could just follow it around like a chess game and you're not looking at stuff sideways, you'd actually know what's going on. And it's like that little spark that goes to, the creative process that makes you do that. But yeah, so I helped him out on that thing, and that's how I became involved with Steadicam.
Because I was interested in, because there's technologies will come around that pretty appreciably change the filmmaking landscape. LEDs are one of them, certainly digital cameras, but I could probably count on 1.5 hands how many like major things have come out that absolutely, like even LEDs. Lighting.
Well, things
lighting.
that change the language.
The way it's, and
the literal language.
One of them.
Absolutely, because there was all of a sudden a different language. There was a new verb. We had, as opposed to a handheld verb and the dolly verb and the crane verb. Then there was a different verb which meant something, and that's what it certainly did.
And so I was wondering if you recall any interesting anecdotes from when that verb came into the lexicon.
Part of it is before the Steadicam, the advent of the Steadicam. It's always been an issue and a challenge to describe 3-dimensional space in a 2-dimensional format.
Mm.
That's what motion pictures are. You know, how do you give this, just because they move does not mean it has a third dimension. It has the fourth dimension, time. Yes, we get that. But what is the third dimension in immersing a viewer, an audience, somebody into the idea that we also coexist in, height, depth, and length of something. And the Steadicam really helped that, because all the rest of the instruments, a crane actually moved in 3 dimensions and a dolly did, but to a very prescribed set of rules. Dolly track came in this length.
Right.
And became that big. That's it. So if you want to make a curve, that's the curve you made. 8 pieces make 360. There you go. Okay, that's what we got because it fits on the truck. Oh, I'm sorry, it doesn't do anything in your realm or your space or anything. And we design things that walls fly out to try and make it work, and all sorts of, incredible machinations. So I think that was part of the thing that the Steadicam did, which allowed the audience to understand and be far more freeing. And then the very first, there's 2 iconic shots that Garrett both did. One of them was on Bound for Glory, where it's a crane shot and everybody goes, oh, it's a crane shot, and the crane goes down. And we go, oh, that's pretty cool. And all of a sudden it keeps on going. And the entire audience,
step off. He invented the step off.
Yeah. And you go, what the fuck? How did that happen? Because subliminally, we knew that that's where it was going to stop, because that's where it had to stop, because we didn't know why, but we'd seen enough of them in our lexicon, And then the other one was behind the tricycle that Stanley did.
Right. He did both of those?
Garrett did that one. Yeah, Garrett did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. He's somebody you should absolutely talk to. A wonderful raconteur. Yeah, I'll put you in touch with him. A wonderful raconteur, a storyteller of the nth degree, funny as all get out, and a dear buddy of mine. But I'm not going to start telling his stories, because there's wonderful stories. But on Eyes Wide Shut, I will tell you a story that kind of involves Garrett. Phone's rings. It's 4:00 in the morning. I answer it. I'm in New York, and I hear his Michos there. And I go, who is this? It's like forehand, landline, of course, back then. Right. And I hear Stanley. I go, what? And he goes, Stanley Kubrick. I go, fuck you. Fine.
Good.
And my wife says, who was that? And I said, oh, fucking Garrett. I can't believe him. Because my buddy used to call people up like Vittorio and give them an Italian accent. And said to all my friends, oh, Vittorio, I want you to work in a movie with me.
Right.
So I'm positive it's Vittorio. I think it's like Garrett, he did that, right? 9 a.m., the phone rings again, and this time it's a clipped British accent.
Right.
That Mr. Kubrick wants to talk to me. And I was like, you're kidding me. So that's what happens when you have a friend who cries wolf enough.
Right.
You fall for it, because I didn't know how many phone calls I would get from Garrett saying, oh, either it's Laszlo or it's Bill Roche, and the accent and everything. We were just line it up and put it on there and say, no, I want you to come and do my movie. And I'm thinking, oh God, this is not real. Anyway, so I got to give Stanley a good fuck you.
So I'm sure there's people all.
And then sadly, I was not available. Yeah. And also he said it happens to him all the time.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
There's this completely random side thought. There's this story I like. There's this Japanese all-female metal band called Bandmate, and they're incredible, just insane musicians. And I guess Jimmy Page went to one of their concerts and saw the drummer Akane and was like, holy shit, I need to talk to that girl. So he goes backstage and someone leaned in and was just like, hey, Jimmy Page wants to talk to you. Same thing. She's like, fuck off. And then he pops his head out, and she was like, what?
I know, right? Because that's what happens, It does happen to us and our heroes that we can't contextualize them ever calling us or bumping into them or anything else like that. It's kind of
right.
But yeah, I think there's certain instruments that have done that, those kind of milestones. I'm trying to think of it. I think the other one was the techno crane did it. because it defined a different kind of movement, lighting and LED things, not as much because
it's more convenience than maybe HMI.
I wouldn't even say that, because when I look at a frame, there's nothing about the lighting, unless it's moving lights. From the
I guess smaller and more powerful. You can hide them places.
No, there's that, but it's also the quality of a mover being a episodal kind of hard shaft was something that we could not achieve before.
Yep.
And so therefore, when you looked at the frame, you went, what is that? What is that happening? What is that shafty thing happening? Because, it was defying the physics of it was either natural or defying the physics of something, or the color changers on them and stuff like that. But very few things. I mean, the camera movement one, I think the Steadicam one was the huge one. And obviously the advent of the small handheld camera, in the early 60s before that.
Yeah. I've always told people to go back and watch films like silent films, because there's way more camera movement in some of those, maybe not silent films, but the second sound was involved. They had to blimp everything and cameras just got locked off.
No, absolutely. Very much so. And if you look at some of the early Harold Lloyd stuff, which is the comedies, and Charlie Chaplin, not as much because it was a little bit more proscenium, but him as a filmmaker liked putting the camera in places that it was like, well, let's put it there because nobody's ever seen it there before. Nobody's ever imagined that. And I'm kind of going back to the whole AI thing. It's like, if it doesn't have it in its data bank, is it going to show you a low camera move? If it didn't know about a Steadicam, would it connect those things? I don't know. I mean, it depends on how it's programmed and every other thing, I suppose. There's a new camera out now. I want to make sure. I don't remember the manufacturer, but it's a box without a lens in all it does. And it knows through GPS and et cetera, et cetera.
It looks like it's got the weird,
it's got some sort of antenna array or something.
Yeah.
And it goes, okay, well, we will composite an image from all the other images that have been here.
Right. Using GPS and accelerometer and and time of day and altimeter. It has a
everything. Time of day, altimeter, right? Exactly. It has it. Has it all. I mean, raining today. All the other stuff that it's trying to do, and it's just going to compose a photograph for you or an image. It'll compose an image, and it's like
fascinating science project.
Yeah, I agree. It's a fascinating science project. I'm kind of wondering where the
applications,
the intent of artistry. Because when we make films and when we make photographs, those of us, and when you do music and when you shoot, you have an intent that might be just purely narrative, but it also is metaphoric.
Right.
This is why the directors I like working with like film, like looking at the world as a metaphor. Because otherwise, I might as well just be outside,
Right. Looking at stuff and putting my own movie together in my head. So the metaphor of the emotional moment is what's lacking in that stuff, by the odd compilation of a million other previous things. And I don't know if it has a button that says, this makes me feel good right now, so therefore I will go now, Right. But that's part of what we do, though. We do that as artistry. We go, we might not understand why it makes us feel good or why it makes us feel horrible or horror film. I mean, that's why horror films is such an interesting genre to shoot, to go back to Cabinet of Curiosities, is that the horror film is a genre which for the most part is an allegory about something in a human existence that you can translate, be it fear of dying, zombies,
being fear of murder, slasher, whatever that might be. They all of them tend to be really deeply rooted in a human condition.
In your episode, bodily autonomy.
Well, yeah, well, two things. One of them is mortality. That's how it opens up. Guy's dying.
Yeah.
We kind of feel like he's dying. All right, a little conversation about he's dying. I got months to live, blah, 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 the stars. And like you said, body autonomy. And what is after death? And what is immortality? So I mean, it's like, so all that gets shoveled into this thing, and you get a gory movie about somebody opening up their own chest. But but getting back again to be a little bit more precise about that camera or whatever is, again, what is the intent of the artist? It's like, man, you playing drums and somebody putting a drum track down off of a drum machine. It's just two different worlds.
Yeah. And I've played with the drum machines before, and it doesn't even sound the same. It's like my fingers don't do it the same way my arms do. It's
because
just
your arms are connected, because ultimately it's connected to your heart.
Yeah.
Ultimately it's connected to something you're listening to, and if you're not listening to that person at the time, it's something you actually are emotionally feeling in the moment. Whether that be anger, joy, pain, whatever that might be. I'm pissed off at the director moment, whatever that might be. Yeah, I mean, it's a little deep, but anyway, what is what it is.
Hey, deep thoughts are good. For me, actually, when I was a kid, the song that made me go, oh, drumming has feeling, beyond like the heavy rock and metal tracks I was listening to, was Since I've Been Loving You by B.B. King. Because that, obviously the guitar there is incredible. But fucking Led Zeppelin.
Oh, okay.
But I was listening to, I actually got to see B.B. King in Santa Rosa, which was incredible. But since the John Bonham, Since I've Been Loving You, that drumming felt soulful in a way that I hadn't heard in the more precise stuff of the 90s. But B.B. King was great. I was listening to a ton of B.B. King.
Well, but all of that, I mean, it felt soulful, and then it felt, I mean, there's a million ways to describe it. And, and sometimes it's deliberately lacking, right? Within a piece that you don't want it to feel that way. You want it to be as possibly mechanical as it can possibly be to play against something else, another instrument, and vice versa. But yeah, it's that interesting thing about where I go, interesting. And it goes back to imagining the image, imagining this track, imagining the music, understanding here what it means, and then translating that. And I don't know if all of that comes forward when you just arrive somewhere, you turn on a monitor, and you have to kind of recall, where am I supposed to be?
Right.
How am I going to find it? Because so often it's turn on a light, look, or make that light glass, turn off that, rather than intuition is the product of experience.
That's a good quote. I mean, the one that I love
too. That's
what I'm saying. That'll be the pull. No, the trick I always pull is I have a color meter and a light meter, and I'll do everything. And then, especially with corporate clients, they're like, "Are you going to set up the camera?" And I'm like, "Yeah, in a second." And then I go, boom, boom, done. And they're like, "Wow."
Of course you do. You go, "Wow, well, how'd you know?" Well, guess what? It is that. It is that kind of thing. But also, it is freeing. It's freeing because in the moment you're creating without having to check on something. It's not. Yeah, it's the same as if you were trying to imagine listening to Keith Jarrett piano, the Cone concerts, right? And realizing that every 8 bars you had to go back and check if it sounded.
Did everyone hear that? Yeah.
Did everyone hear that? Or was my moaning too loud, or whatever the fuck you want to say about it? You go, well, that's not the creative process. The creative process is like we're writing. Start writing. Then edit. Don't write and then edit and write and edit. Just write. Anyway.
Yeah. I hate to cut this off because I feel like we could go for another hour, but I unfortunately do have another interview. So
Good.
Well,
Give whoever it is my regards. It was a really nice chatting with you, and you have my email. I think, right?
I'm sure I can get it. Yeah.
Yeah, and remind me, and I'll hook you up to chat with GV Garrett, because like I said, it's a fascinating. I mean, I don't know if there's an agenda to what you do, but if you want to talk about camera movement and the advent of the Steadicam, he's a really cool dude.
Yeah.
Right.
A buddy might actually. Do you know Rob Verona?
No.
Steadicam operator. He does a lot of live television stuff, but he's like, apparently he says that he brought Steadicam to live television. And I've always wanted to spot check him on that. I'm like, I don't know enough Steadicam, deep Steadicam operators to figure that out. But
what year would that be?
I don't know, probably the early 90s.
There's an amazing thing. I think Vittorio lit it. Bertolucci directed it.
The Conformist.
It was a lot. It was, I think it was, Figaro, an opera. Live in something like 15 or 20 venues across Rome. What was the opera? It's amazing to look at. And the Steadicam going from one place to another and cross-cutting. So, I mean, we literally...
Ooh, that's cool.
And like you would take somebody into a carriage and then bring them into the house. They'd have another camera ready to do that scene while the Steadicam went upstairs and grabbed that coming down the hallway. Then I mean, just the interesting pressure of creativity of being, because I mean, I know we got to go, but being in performance is way different.
Yeah. Well, right. I will say when you're done with this project, we'll just have you right back and we'll pick up. Cool.
Talk to you later. Take care.
Thanks, brother. Take care.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. As this is an independently funded podcast, we rely on support from listeners like you. So if you'd like to help, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/frameandrefpod. We really appreciate your support, and as always, thanks for listening.